Welcome to the Thriving Misfits, the podcast where we explore the dynamic intersection of diversity, inclusion, and personal growth. I'm your host, Fiona Young, and today we have an incredible guest joining us, Ray Liew. Ray is a visionary in the world of data and AI, driven by his passion for unlocking the full potential of information. With over 5 years of expertise in the field, Ray serves as a senior commercial accounts executive at Databricks, a leading provider of unified data analytics platforms. Ray helps his clients navigate complex data challenges and maximize the value of their investments. And beyond his professional endeavors, Ray was also a co-host of the podcast Talkla, where he delves into the stories and journeys of successful millennials, offering insights and lessons on career transitions and personal development. I have so much to learn from you, Ray, but please join us as we embark on a journey of discovery with Ray today. So welcome, Ray.
Hey, thanks so much, Fiona. Wow, you really make, great way to introduce myself. Make me sound super professional, well accomplished. I immediately feel much better about myself. Yeah, so very happy to be here. And for those tuning in, thanks for taking and spending 30 minutes of your time.
Absolutely. Well, that could be your personal brand message moving forward, eh?
Yeah.
All right, so let's start off with some rapid fire round questions just to get to know you a little bit better, eh? So with your busy schedule, juggling data analytics and empowering others, how do you find time to fit in your fitness routine? Do you ever analyze your steps or strategize while on the treadmill?
I think that's a funny take, right? So two parts to the question. I mean, two answers to the question. It's two questions, right? So the latter one, right? No, I don't use data analytics. I mean, I already have enough occupational hazard kind of labeling of my peers, my friends around. Everything I talk to them is related to data. It relates to Databricks. It relates to how to run Spark to make your jobs more efficient. So yeah, I think I try to stay out of those when I actually think and structure my life. But I think the more interesting part to that question is like, oh, how do I find time and juggle, right? I think when something is already important enough in your life, you'll make time no matter what. Like even yourself, Fiona, you just became a mom. Congrats on that. Okay, not just became, a year plus, almost 2, right? Yeah, you find time for your son no matter what, no matter how busy you are or how exciting other things becomes, right? So that's sort of the mindset that I approach fitness. Yeah, and it can be tough some days, but if you think about the why and how important it is, then you just navigate towards that.
Yeah. And I saw this morning on social media, you ran 10K. Is that right?
Yes. I'm going to say it out verbally. I'm going to do a full marathon. I'm actually scared around about that, but I just did 10 km trial over the weekend, Sunday, and it was brutal. Yeah. But looking forward to see how I can challenge myself mentally and physically to achieve that full marathon next year. I give myself 2025 to complete it.
Standard charter one in Hong Kong?
I mean, the ideal one that I want to go is the Tokyo 2025, but obviously you need to ballot, you need to hit certain times. I'm not even sure the process, but Tokyo is the one that I'm gunning for. If not, the one in Hong Kong, the one that's in Singapore, whatever. Yeah, as long as I can find something to work towards too. Yeah.
Wow, now that you have revealed it to everyone out there, this is like, we're going to hold you accountable. We're going to do
Yes. All right. Challenge accepted.
Now, I know that you do a lot of data stuff, but is there any tracking device or tracker that you're using to track your fitness regime?
Yeah, so that's something I've been really thinking at the back of my mind. Not yet, because everything now is, if I show up at the gym, if I do a workout, that's really good, right? But I think recently, as I started preparing the mindset to train for a marathon, and there are certain metrics and goals that I want to hit, right? And I think it just got me thinking that I should invest in either an Apple Watch or a wearable where I can track my heart rate. People always ask me, oh, when you're doing this pace, are you in zone 1, zone 2? I'm like, I have no idea, man. Like, I just feel it's tough running that, right? Yeah, so to have something to actually track and then over time see the trend. You don't need machine learning, right? Just project the trend. I think that's something that I will look into. Now that I mention it here, yeah, in the next month or two, right? Yeah, so when I clock in more runs, I can see how I improve or deprove, right?
Right. Because I also recently started running again, because running is not really
Awesome.
my forte or my cup of tea, but it's just something that I felt could be a good balance between whatever
Yeah.
I'm doing in the fitness space. And
Yeah.
I am the only one who does not have those wearables. So I'm still running around with my iPhone, with my Nike
Me
Run.
too. I do that exactly. But then I feel like, yes, they're tracking my distance and my pace, but there's so much more data that could be captured that I'm missing out on, right? And I think if, yeah, full marathon, yeah, maybe I should track it more detail, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, you and I, we have probably a very similar identity. We call ourselves a banana, yellow on the outside,
Yeah.
white on the inside. The last time we
Yeah.
spoke, that's just really resonates with me. Now, when you
Yeah.
moved to Hong Kong from Malaysia, so you're a fellow Malaysian too. When you moved to Hong
Yep.
Kong for your studies, for your work, did people often assume you were fluent in Cantonese just because you look Chinese? And how did you navigate those assumptions?
Yeah, I think yeah, looking back, yes and no, right? Yes, meaning like if I'm outside of university or when I say or if I don't even say anything, they'll just assume 你可以講廣東話, like you can speak it, right? Yeah. But no, when I say, hey, I'm actually from Malaysia, yeah, and you introduce yourself, then they'll be like, oh, okay. They will be super impressed if you know Guangdonghua or know Chinese, right? So I'm sort of like some people like I still position myself banana, but some people call me fake banana. So I studied Chinese until primary, secondary school because that's something my dad really wants all of us to have because hey, if you're Chinese, you need to know Chinese. So we really did the bare minimum, which really is not enough, right? But I went through all the hoops and everything, and I almost failed my Chinese, but we made it. And when I went to high school and all, it was just neglected. So when I came to Hong Kong for uni, Cantonese to me was just a spoken language, right? So I had zero, close to zero, right? Other than the basics like dai sai, chi saw, ga dan for protein, right? Back then, yeah. So those were my basic words. Yeah, yeah.
All right. Now, being a banana in Hong Kong, have you found it easier or harder to connect with locals and integrate into the community? How has this influenced
Uh,
your work and also your study?
yeah, so I think I'm fortunate that Hong Kong is still a place where English is perfectly okay, right?
Mm.
Depending on scenario, right? Okay, there's good sides and downsides where if you really want to assimilate to local 本地人嘅諗法 or circle, right? 你都要識少少啦. Yeah, and I'm aware that there are people that don't know Cantonese that are listening and tuning in the podcast. But basically, it's like, yeah, to really connect with people at the most local level, you need to speak their mother tongue, right? Or at least try, right? And then people will know. So to answer your question, right? I think it has been a journey, right? I think Hong Kong is beautiful, right? They welcome people. It's a melting pot. They welcome different cultures, but all cultures or all countries or cities would still have their own identity, right? So the closer you explore and navigate to that identity, then it becomes really, really interesting, right? I won't say I'm fluent, but at least I really do my best, put myself in the shoes and learn from the job mainly because at university I was so sheltered. I can just use English the whole way. So I only learn the bad stuff, right? So that when people talk bad about me or when I want to make sarcastic comments or jokes about other locals, I can use that. Yeah. So it has been an interesting journey, but also a very fulfilling one. Yeah.
No, I think what you mentioned is right. Communication or learning the native language is a sort of respect to the locals as well, for us to try to integrate, at least in our host country. But I always remember one of my colleagues telling me, I was in Hong Kong for about 3 years already, and they expected me to speak Cantonese fluently. And we're talking about business Cantonese, right?
Stuff.
So what I told them is that, hey, if I would be a Caucasian German, you wouldn't expect that, right? So again, it's a little bit of that bias
Mm,
as we look Chinese that they expect it, but nevertheless, you're right. It's important for us to have some sort of respect and also to integrate. And the best way to integrate is with the
yeah,
language. For me, how I
yeah.
learned Cantonese is through my beautician because she just didn't really
Wow.
speak a lot of English. And I challenged myself and I told her,
Mm,
only speak Cantonese to me. And while I was getting a massage or a facial, we would just communicate in Cantonese. That's how I was able to brush up my Cantonese.
yeah, yeah. And I think we all need that trigger point, right? That real need.
Yeah.
Because it's just more when the need or the benefits to learn something or pick up something is strong enough. Because the current status quo is like you cannot communicate, right? English just is not enough, right? So then do you expect the other person to learn or you take it, right? So normally I'm the kind of person like, oh, whatever that we can control, we take ownership, right? So language is one of the things that honestly, I'm not a language person. I would say, yeah, lazy, zero incentive to learn a new language, right? Because born and raised in Malaysia, we already have so many different languages in our
I
mind. We're always doing
know.
translations, right? Yeah. So yeah, picking up a new language is always like, yeah, you need to have that value or that genuine need to connect with people at a more personal level. Then yeah, it's good to pick up a few words. And then as you start seeing results, then you'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm improving. Yeah.
I completely resonate with that because with my family, they're speaking five different languages in one sentence, and it just confused me.
Yeah.
All right. Now, you used to have this amazing podcast, Talkla. Maybe you're going
Yeah.
to adapt it again. We never know.
Yeah.
So, as a
Yeah.
previous podcast host, how do you ensure that your podcast serves as a platform for diverse voices and perspectives, especially for those who might
Yeah.
identify as a misfit or even as a banana like us?
Yeah, I think honestly I never really thought too much about that, right? But I thought a lot about what I wanted to achieve at the podcast, right? And it's the main objective is really to explore a perspective that even normal human beings doing something that they really like, it's already something successful in its own way, right? So I really wanted to explore that. So the concept that really inspired me was Humans of New York. I'm not sure if you heard of that. Basically, this photographer takes photo or portrait shots of someone in New York on the streets, and he interviews and understands their story. And it's very this person looks so normal, but he has such a rich background, right? So I was like, we need something like that in Asia,
Hmm.
in Hong Kong, right? And I was just thinking at that period of time, like, we can't like how come there's some people that are more successful than us in our same I know it's not nice to compare with different people, but like it's human nature to also look, even though now we try our best, hey, we are in our own journey, don't compare, right? Understand your why and work towards that, right? But I just really wanted to understand how come that person or that individual can be so successful or they decided to take on this path, right? So really understanding behind the scenes. And I like talking, right? I think we agree on this. So I thought podcast was one of the good ways to really highlight
Hmm.
their perspective and persona, right?
Yeah.
And to answer your question on uh how do I make sure that, I'm thinking, so I don't really think about it, but as I, think about the guests, I make sure that the guests that I choose on to come on the show is that first they have to have an interesting perspective or something very personal that no one wants to talk about. So some of the topics are actually very personal, like them coming out from LGBT to the parents. How did that affect the relationship? So I made sure like I wanted to find people that are comfortable speaking about it. There were some guests that obviously turned down, and that's okay, right? Because when we do sales or we do BD, we don't expect everyone will give back the time, right? But the ones that click, so that's sort of indirectly a qualification process, right? So hopefully through that outreach and all, if they resonate enough with your podcast topic, your vision, your purpose, then they come on, right? So that sort of gives them hopefully a safe environment to speak openly, even though it's public, right? So I do coffee chat before the podcast itself, and then we do the podcast recording. Yeah. So yeah, that's sort of a long way to answer the question, but hope it provided context. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And have you heard any positive feedback from your listeners that one of the episodes really changed their lives?
Yeah, I wouldn't say change the life, right? But as long as that there are some so in terms of the audience, right? Most of them obviously are friends or young adults, right? So or even friends of the guests, right? Because then they share and they're on the podcast, right? But what really keeps me going back then, obviously now it's on hold, like season 2 coming up, right? Yeah. But there are friends or young adults that say, "Hey, I never thought of it this way. I didn't know you were so interesting," or they've got so much out of it. I just felt like that itself was already fulfilling enough for me to keep going, right? But even I didn't have any comment, right? I think we had this chat on the side before. I was perfectly fine to continue just doing the podcast because I think during that era, the COVID era, I think now it's like long forgotten, but it was a time where we all were like stuck in somewhere. We were restricted to do different things. Yeah. So podcasts and was one of the way for me to meet someone. And I found like meeting someone just gives you that stimulus of new experience. And because the talk and the chat is something so personal on their whole life journey, their thinking process, their thought process, I just felt every time after I finished the podcast, I was like, wow, I'm enlightened. It's like the same feeling that when you head to a new country, experience new cultures, food, experiences. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And I'm looking forward to that journey, obviously.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah, you will, you will.
now we have a lot of listeners and viewers who feel like sometimes they don't have that sense of belonging. They feel like a misfit. They feel like a banana. Do you have any practical steps or ideas that you can suggest for these individuals so that they have that mindset shift from seeing their cultural identity as a adversity and change it to transform them maybe into an advantage? Is there something that you can share?
Yeah. Yeah. So these are big topics, right? But let me try to simplify what has helped me, right? And it's not easy, right? But first, you need to at least have enough self-belief that you are unique in your own way, right? And it's very tough to have this mindset because with the age of social media nowadays, we compare too much. People only share the good stuff, right? But hey, everyone is sort of unique in their own way. And I like the faster and the sooner you believe that, you start having a bit of self-love. And even though you are aware of some of your shortfalls or weaknesses, I think at least you're aware and you're working towards that, right? Yeah. So first, just being in tune with yourself. I think embracing who you are, your uniqueness of yourself. Like for us, Malaysian Chinese, I think we were fortunate enough to go to different places to have different point of views. Malaysian heart, global minds, right? I think I really like that. Yeah, my dad and I think my secondary school always says that. Right now, I'm living that. Just makes me feel like, yeah, wow. Back then, I was like, what's that? Right. So yeah, that's going off a tangent a bit, but really embracing who you are, because first you need to know yourself, love yourself, and yeah, don't compare too much. We all have our own pace, right? So once you're in tune with that, you feel like, oh, actually, it's not so bad, because then you start because why I put that as step number one, because you need to reflect on your current state and why you love yourself, what are some of your shortfalls or weaknesses to work on, right? Because the next thing is like how to use your unique identity to become a differentiation. Yeah, so I think that is really the turning point on how you really fully embrace yourself. And I think another bigger point from there is like, and I'm jumping around because I think this concept is important when you actually start thinking about your competitive advantage and you want to work towards that based on your unique, right? You also have to anchor yourself on your purpose, the why behind you do certain things. Because in that process, when you try new things, it may get really awkward, you get rejections, you get negative stimuli from the world, right? Because the world is complicating, right? We can only control what we can control, right? But having a clear why is always very helpful to make sure that you're on track, and you're also very critical on whether whatever that you're doing, or when a friend gives you an idea or give a comment, is that person objective in saying that, because you know why you're doing certain things. Yeah. So I'm not sure this, yeah.
Oh,
But yeah, these are some
absolutely.
of my tips. Yeah. That I'll give.
Definitely resonate with that because the why is like our North Star, right? It gives
Yeah.
us that direction. It gives us the compass because otherwise we're just gonna do all these different actions that's not going to lead into that direction. And we
Yeah.
cannot start early enough to identify the why. And it is a big
Yeah.
question, right? Like
It's too hard. It's too hard.
what
Big
is my
question. Yeah.
purpose in life is such a huge question. But I think that we should already start doing it like in our teenage years to understand what is our North
Yeah.
Star so that all of the things
Yeah.
that we're doing, whether it's for work or whether it's in our personal space, it
Yeah.
actually has a specific direction and it's much
Yeah.
more meaningful that way. No, that's great.
Yeah. I
Now,
just wanted to write on that comment, right? Because I think this is such a big topic, and that North Star, that why, I just want to say, like, it's okay to adapt. When you anchor on something, yes, it has to be important. It cannot be just something like, I want good health. Because I think that is a bit, it's important for sure, but it shouldn't be a why.
mhm,
It has to be something bigger, right? So I'm just hoping to add some structure on some of the criteria of what would be a good why, right? Something that it can be very simple, but it needs to be meaningful, right? And yeah, starting, I agree. Teenage years would be the best time because that's a time where you sort of have your own thoughts. You're already all over social media, so you see so many different people's thoughts. So that's, I think, where millennials, Gen Z, or Alpha, Gen, all have a head start. But because of that, I also feel like, how can they mentally process so many things at the same time, right? So it's also a shortfall in a way, right? So it's
yes,
up to them how they go through that, right? And discover the why through that process. Yeah. And the important part is adapt when required, pivot when you really need to. Like, don't be afraid to really change 180 degrees, but your why needs to be solid. Yeah.
yes, I totally agree. And I also understand that right now with social media, all the data is at our fingertips. It's a pro and a con because now, as a young parent or as a new parent, we get so much information. It's like information overload. So we need to weed out whatever we actually need in order for us to distill that why. And like you said, how we approach it in order to get there, it may evolve over time. There are challenges that are external. For example, COVID, right? The pandemic
Yeah.
was such a huge challenge for
Yeah.
for everyone globally. So
Yeah.
we needed
Yeah.
to have that resilience. And I think having the why would give us that resilience and the perseverance to stick to it when times get tough.
Yeah, I agree. But do you, just food for thought, do you think COVID was, yeah, obviously it's a really, really negative thing, right? But for those that got through, and I'm an optimist, sometimes people call me an idealist, right? I just felt like it really gave an opportunity for people to reset and also really rethink about what kind of life they want to be with the family, with friends, because they're just in one place, can't do anything. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It was such a, well, of course, a lot of people lost their lives or their
Yeah.
loved ones.
Yeah.
I think for most of us, we should have used that time to really reevaluate the
Yeah.
importance of what we see in life, our loved ones, our passions. And I hope that now after the pandemic, and people have already forgotten about that, that we still are going back to those thoughts and not go back to status quo like before the pandemic. Right.
Yeah.
Really lovely talking to you as usual, Ray. So this concludes today's insightful episode of the Thriving Misfits, and we've been privileged to gain invaluable insights from Ray, a trailblazer in the realms of data and AI. Ray's dedication to helping customers and partners harness the full potential of data through Databricks innovation solutions is truly commendable. And for me, it's also very inspiring to learn from you as a very seasoned podcaster. So I hope to stay connected with you, learn from you. So as we wrap up, let's remember the importance of embracing inclusion in our personal and professional lives. And Ray's journey really reminds us that through collaboration, through empowerment, and also identifying our North Star, our why, we can really drive positive change and thrive in an ever-evolving world. So if you enjoyed today's podcast episode, don't forget to subscribe to the Thriving Misfits on Spotify and YouTube for more inspiring conversations. Thank you for tuning in, and until the next time, so keep on thriving, Misfits.